What's up, brothers and sisters? Brother Darcblade here with another quick guide to Space Marine 2. In this beginner's guide, we are going to be going over 10 combat tips to help you in battle. This is mainly aimed at the campaign as well as the operations mode, but can be applied to the Eternal War mode as well, the PvP mode. So let's jump straight into this quick video. First of all, know your role. What I mean by this is know what your class is all about, what it specializes in, and what it does. Every Space Marine is different, even in the campaign they are different. Whether you're playing Titus, Gadriel, or Chiron, they are slightly different thanks to the abilities they have. In operations, even more so. For example, the Heavy Space Marine specializes in ranged damage, rather than, say, melee damage, which the Bulwark and the Assault Space Marines specialize in. So always keep this in mind and approach operations and missions with whatever playstyle best suits your personal Astartes. Over the next month, I'll be bringing you in-depth guides about each of the classes, as well as various builds that you can use for them. So don't forget to check them out. The next tip is to share supplies. As you go through operations or the campaign, you'll see supplies all over the place, whether they're medical stims, ammunition, grenades, whatever. Now, if you want to be efficient, don't take everything for yourself. Communicate with your team, see who needs what, utilizing the options menu to see what your allies have access to, and using the ping system as well can all help when it comes to sharing supplies, so everyone has enough to keep on effectively purging. The next tip is to break line of sight. What I mean by this is when we're actually in combat, and we're taking on waves of enemies, it's not wise to fight out in the open. This is because whilst you can deal with melee combatants quite easily this way, ranged opponents will have a field day and just mow you down. Space Marines, while they may be angels of death, are not immortal. So when you're dealing with ranged combatants, and especially if you're a melee user, break their line of sights, move around a corner or something, and force the ranged opponents to come to you and close the distance. The next tip is to understand grenade types. There are currently 4 in the game: frag grenades, which are great at dealing AoE damage against weaker opponents, shock grenades that deal constant area of effect damage, crack grenades that have a smaller damage radius but hit incredibly hard, great for taking out Chaos Space Marines and Tyrannid Warriors, and then you have melter bombs, which hit the hardest but they can't be thrown. They kind of have to be placed and then manually detonated, but they are incredibly good at taking out bosses and the toughest opponents you'll face. The next tip, and I've mentioned this in a previous video, is to keep an eye out for red and blue barrels. These can cause massive blast waves that are surprisingly deceptive in terms of their radius, that can help thin out waves of opponents. So always keep an eye out in your environment, as these really do help in combat. You can even mark them for your allies to make them aware of such barrels. The next combat tip is to understand finisher ready enemies. Now, what I mean by this is certain enemies who you can perform finishes on, they will flash red in a stunned state. Now you can use this as an opportunity to give yourself a breather, as in this stunned state they won't do anything. They won't attack back, they won't move, so on and so forth. And they stay in this state for a reasonable amount of time as well. So if you're faced with, say, 3 Tyrannid Warriors, and one of them becomes finisher ready, you can continue damaging the other 2 if you have health and you don't need the armor back from performing the finisher, thus making it a little bit more efficient. I will also say as well, when it comes to finishers, normally those Space Marines who are in melee distance normally need the finishers more than people at range. I would also say as well, don't steal every single finisher for yourself, especially if you have full armor, as your fellow Space Marines could potentially need it more. Read the battlefield and the situation you're in and act accordingly. Which brings me on to the Guardian Relic, which is a wonderful item that allows you to self-revive yourself. You can tell if an ally has a Guardian Relic when you go to the options menu and you see where your mission objective is, near to how many stims your allies have. The Guardian Relic will also automatically kick in if you have a mortal wound, and this would have been your last death should you go down, giving you an automatic self-revive, healing that mortal wound, and bringing you back into the fight. So always keep an eye out for these, and try to make sure everyone in your team has them, unless they're carrying the Gene Seed, which is an item that basically gives us bonus XP should we get through a mission without fainting, whilst carrying it. The next tip is to stop enemies calling for aid. At certain points during an encounter, certain enemies, namely Tyrannid Warriors or Chaos Space Marines, will stop and call for aid. This brings up a little icon above their head and a noise indicator, which will start to slowly fill up red. If it fills up red all the way, they will call for aid, bringing in more opponents, which can really make operations tricky. But you can stop them from calling for aid by staggering them, whether through a grenade, a hard hit and range shot, melee attack, whatever. Interrupt them, cause them to stagger, and their call for aid will cease, making the encounters more manageable. The next tip is when it comes to your loadouts, cover shortcomings. Now what I mean by this is, say you're using the sniper, who specializes at long range combat. Obviously it's going to struggle a little bit when it comes to close encounters. With that in mind, use a bolt pistol that specializes more in close range combat, or alternatively use and create a second loadout that makes use of the submachine gun rather than the sniper rifle, so when you're presented with an opportunity at the loadout drop pod to switch your loadout, and you know there's a close range encounter or a horde wave encounter coming up, you can switch to weaponry that is better suited for those ranges. And finally is coordination. You can apply this to any cooperative game out there, or PvP game even. Communicating, whether it's via text, voice chat, or even a ping system if you're a little bit antisocial like myself. They all help on a mission. I personally would recommend getting used to the ping system, as it points out items, enemies, points of interest, and more. It's easy to do, on the controller is simply up on the D-pad, and it relays information to your allies, which helps on the harder difficulties. But there we have it, those are 10 combat tips for Space Marine 2. Some of you may already know most of these, but nonetheless I hope they help out anyone who's getting into the game for the first time. But if there's any extra tips you want to put in the comments down below, please do so, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you 10 combat tips for Space Marine 2. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.